We are live. You're watching the Merged Marketing Podcast. You're listening to the Merged Marketing Podcast. This is episode 189. In this episode, we're talking about old A/B testing versus the new, discussing advanced A/B testing while taking into account the original lead source and publisher. My guest today right there is Jeff Schaffer. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
Absolutely. Jeff invited me out to an amazing dinner in Las Vegas there a few months back when we were attending LeadsCon. Amazing experience, amazing dinner. That was definitely the highlight of the trip, was that night at that restaurant. I can't remember the name. Can you?
Oh, gosh. Putting me on the spot here. Not offhand.
I forget the resort too. But if we do come up with it and can figure it out, we'll put it in the show notes for the episode for sure. But Jeff, maybe you could start by telling us a bit of your journey into becoming the COO at Phonexa.
Absolutely. So I've been in some form of sales, marketing, or business operations roles for a little north of 20 years, spent a good amount of time heading up marketing for a sizable financial services wholesaler. And most recently, in my most recent prior life, prior to joining the team here at Phonexa, ran a digital agency with a strong focus on e-commerce, performance marketing, and site development.
So obviously you have quite a background in the topic that we're talking about today, which is A/B testing. And maybe for our audience, especially the people that are maybe not as educated on what A/B testing is, can you give your definition of what A/B testing is?
Yeah, absolutely. And specifically as it pertains to email marketing, which is largely what we'll be chatting about today, A/B testing, in short, is testing out multiple creatives, multiple subject lines to measure which is going to perform best amongst a given audience.
Awesome. And so when we're talking about email split testing, does that differentiate itself from other platforms? What makes email so different when it comes to A/B testing?
Sure. So standard metrics that most marketers look at when it comes to A/B testing would be things like open rate, click-through rate, and for those that are able to then measure the resultant conversions from that, obviously the conversions that those yield. And there's a million and one solutions out there and a million and one ways that folks have been doing A/B testing. But the way in which A/B testing is done rarely, especially in the world where you have brands that are sourcing traffic from multiple affiliates, it rarely takes into account the true origin source of that given lead, specifically the publisher sub ID. And all too often what we see is that web leads, for example, for a given vertical or given product may be sourced from 5, 15, 50 different publisher sources, and eventually are all lumped into one bucket and then A/B tested to see what creatives and what subject lines are going to yield the best open rate or click-through rate, whatever the given goal is of measuring the efficacy of, in order to determine what the rest of the audience gets. And what we're here to talk about today is a little bit of a more strategic approach to A/B testing. And we'll use email specifically to really cover two things. One is really bifurcating the audience that you're putting into a given test to separate it as much as possible and be able to identify which publisher source that came from. And depending on what your tech stack looks like, you may or may not actually be able to do that, particularly if you're dealing with more age data that at this point has just ended in the non-converting bucket, as it were. The second thing we want to talk about a little bit is taking an approach to A/B testing that's less about measuring click-through rate and more about generating the highest intent response, which is a call. And all too often, the email gets put into this category of just measuring open rate, click-through rate, who ends up reconverting on a site, filling out another form. And it's largely because, surprisingly, despite the fact that the technologies have been around for years, many marketers, including major brands, have been very slow to adopt appropriate call tracking mechanisms. And when they do, what we see is that email is commonly left out of the mix. In other words, they may have call tracking mechanisms set up on their site to manage their Google ads, performance, Facebook ads, and they're doing dynamic number insertion to be able to measure that initial call that's coming in. But when that prospect ends up not converting and they go in the we'll get to them eventually remarketing bucket, and then head of marketing is doing A/B testing and emailing all these consumers in order to get them to re-engage, we're seeing the same phone number on all the emails, if there is even a phone number. More often than not, they're just trying to send them back to the site to take some other sort of conversion action. And so there's really two high-level topics. One is getting very granular about the original source of your traffic, especially when it comes to sub-IDs, because you may have a long-standing relationship with a publisher, and this publisher is sending you 100,000 leads a month or whatever the case is, but you have no idea how 80,000 of those or 20,000 of those or what their journey was. You just know it's coming from this one source. We recently had a client who was A/B testing a non-engaged audience, and at our recommendation tested two different ways. They had two different creatives, and we tested it two ways. One was the old way. So they changed up the creatives, same subject line for both, so we could strictly measure click-through rate. And the first way, we noticed a blended click-through rate variance of only 10%. Now, these are leads that had come from 6 different publishers over the last 8 months. In the second case, we broke down the audience by sub-ID for these 6 publishers. And what we found was that the click-through rate variance was over 40% for 2 of those publishers. In other words, had we just done it the old way, we wouldn't have seen much of a difference in the email content, and a decision could have been made on an ongoing basis that one is just slightly better than the other. But by actually breaking down the audience into where the real traffic source came from, even if you don't know the whole journey the consumer went through, we're able to get much better insights into how to get portions of that audience to engage.
Without that visibility, it's shooting darts at a dartboard blindfolded, isn't it? Like if you don't have that level of understanding in terms of what's converting and what's taking that user to that next level in their journey, it can be really tough without having this technology.
Right. And, unfortunately, we're in a place where portions of marketing channels have gotten very advanced. The analytics, the ability to look into these channels and know so much about them. But in the performance marketing space, it can be a little bit of a black box, especially when you have an established publisher relationship, you have a particular perception about how this publisher performs. And without knowing who they're sourcing traffic from, where it's coming in, for all you know, you could have a publisher that is picking up, 5 new sources in a given month, and all of a sudden you're seeing changes in conversion rates. You don't know why this is happening or not. But if you put that all in the same bucket and you just look at, just A/B testing your creatives without really taking into account the various ways that consumer could have come into that channel, then you're really making decisions with only half the information, or really, in reality, less than half the information.
When we're talking about the A/B testing, can you talk a bit about the elements that you are A/B testing, especially when it pertains to phone tracking as well? What do you find are the biggest needle movers in that creative to get the result that people desire?
Absolutely. Now, in an ideal world, if you're a brand, if you're controlling the entire consumer experience, then you can really, really tailor everything in that email, the creatives, everything, because you know where it originated, right? And if you know that somebody came to your particular form because they started off on a gardening blog or whatever the case is, and you know they have interest in that topic, then you can tailor your creatives to that. But sometimes you just don't, right? And you simply don't know what the original source was, what that consumer journey looked like. So testing creatives, right? Testing the density of text, colors. Obviously, there's a lot of information that we're able to tweak based on gender, location, essentially localization of creatives at times that may resonate with some more than others. Subject line A/B testing would, of course, be old hat and probably not something a little, lowbrow for your audience to go into, but obviously that's something that you want to take into account. But when it comes to the call tracking component of things, right? Very often marketers are scared, if you will, to make the primary call to action a call, right? Because the thought process is that you're going to have a higher amount of people that are going to click through an email at some given time than those that are going to call. So what do we want to measure when it comes to calls? Keeping in mind that that's a much higher intent prospective purchaser of the product or service in question. Well, obviously we want to take into account whether the call ends up converting, right? And whether they end up making the purchase that you want them to make, or taking the action, the subscription, whatever that may be that you want them to make, which highlights another common breakdown we see in the marketing funnel flow. Calls tend to be very disconnected. And even those entities that are using call tracking to measure call duration, things like that, very commonly will find that there's a big disconnect between their customer management system, their CRM, and having information about conversions trickle back up the funnel in a pingback disposition to the original lead source. So they're, mixing and matching reports from multiple data sources to be able to see, well, what converted, what didn't. In an ideal world, whether it's a click, a call, an email, or another form fill, a re-engagement of some sort, or a first engagement, if we're talking about cold emailing, you want that to be attributed back to the original source.
What do you find are some of the most successful sources to generate a conversion? I know it's a loaded question, but you absolutely, being on the ground with this stuff, you'll have a really good idea in terms of what you're seeing from a source standpoint for what's working.
Yeah, obviously intent is the big question, right? What is the intent of that consumer that's filling out the form? And the answer to your question is, as you well know, is going to vary greatly depending on industry, depending on what you're selling, et cetera. But when it comes to the consumer experience, the question is, how do you really, really peel off that high intent user, right? And sometimes the intent is not going to be expressed just based off of the information that's coming into you. Majority of marketers out there are still just relying on information provided in a given form, right? When there's a whole slew of solutions out there that can, in real time, take maybe the 4 or 5 data points that you've collected from a consumer, that they've given you this first party information, and be able to supplement that with a ton of other information that can help you then as a marketer, A, maybe put them down a different path in the customer journey, or B, make a different decision as to how you may re-engage with them at a later time. So there's no right answer. There's no silver bullet for what's the best place to get these prospects. And whether we're talking paid media, organic search, anything else, direct mail, whatever it could be, it's going to vary greatly. The question really becomes, what are you going to do with that data, and how many levers can you pull and A/B test to really determine if you thought you have customers meeting, 5 different profiles, and you really, really dig into that, and you end up determining these customers that we think are coming from 5 different places, or that we think fit into 5 buckets. Really, it's 20 buckets. And we have a lot more engineering to do to be able to get an X% lift or a Y% lift from this category or that category. It just gives you more control and more insight when you're really, really able to better identify how to interact with that given audience. And sometimes you just need more data in order to do that.
As a Facebook advertising agency and SEO agency, it's for us one of the best ways we've been able to attract leads at the source that generates a good quality lead is using a lead magnet to entice those leads, almost like bait on the end of your lure to attract a certain type of fish from social media. It works really, really well. But if somebody opted into 5 reasons to invest in the real estate in Turks and Caicos, they're showing interest in an exact topic, and you can really guide that journey. I find that method, I don't know if you're executing on that at all at Phonexa, if that's out of your kind of realm, but to use that kind of approach to attract a certain type of lead, because what type of script that kind of call is going to be on the other end, knowing what lead magnet they opted into.
Exactly. And to your point about what kind of script, what kind of call is going to be at the other end, right? Like the situation you just described, chances are you're probably not going to have, low income average consumer that's expressing interest in that just to fill their day with some material to read, right? But if there's some call to action for an offering like that, a magnet like that that leads to a call, and then you have perhaps four different ways that somebody, or four different sites, whatever the case may be, where somebody could have had access to that phone number to express interest in that, your call center agents may have varied scripting, may have varied approaches, may have different ways that they handle that particular caller, which highlights, kind of zooming out a little bit, another big disconnect that we see between marketing and sales, specifically as it pertains to call tracking, is that very often we're seeing the call center agent completely disconnected from the original lead source. And if they aren't disconnected, and sometimes this is by design because we don't want call center agents to know where all the marketing's coming from, but at the end of the day, in an ideal situation, a competent call center team should have enough visibility, or I should say their managers should have enough visibility into the original source and what their journey was in order to properly handle that call, as opposed to just putting them through a mill, right? Go ahead.
100%. I was going to say, the closer you can marry that message to the person that's seeing it on the other end, the better conversion you're going to get. And that also, I'm sure that has a lot to do with the call center as well, making those calls. The smoother and more natural that call is, because you understand that prospect, the higher closing rate you can expect.
Right. And we could stop asking that silly question of where'd you hear about us, unless it's
right.
unless it's by design.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So I just don't think a lot of marketers are taking the time and attention to dive this deep into it. And obviously you've outlined the importance of it. But when it comes to scaling these efforts, right? Obviously it takes time to scale these efforts. Maybe you can talk about some of those challenges that come along with trying to scale a program like this.
Sure. One of the biggest challenges has to do with getting disparate technologies to talk to each other and to be able to have clean and seamless reporting that can truly show you what the consumer journey is, and to have all the appropriate endpoints lined up so you can see, how did we market to them? Where did they enter the funnel? Where did they maybe stop engaging in this way and start engaging somewhere else? And then they fell off there and we re-engaged them by email, et cetera. And so that's one of the challenges that we've solved at Phonexa. So, we have a singular all-in-one platform for all things performance marketing that can allow you to optimize your campaigns, whether you're in the affiliate space and you're dealing with 1,000 publishers and hundreds of buyers, whether you're a network or whether you're a brand that's sourcing traffic, got multiple top of funnel inputs where you've got 20 publishers you're working with, 5 that are sending you calls, 15 sending you web leads, you've got direct mail, you've got TV, you've got any number of different inputs, and you want to be able to measure the efficacy of new lead sources quickly and make business decisions quickly as to whether to invest in them further or cut them off. You have to have the right tech to do that. So you can go the old approach, right, which is select best of breed in each category, pick a good call tracking vendor, pick a web lead tracking distribution platform, get your CRM, get your dialer, get your everything else, your email solution, and then spend who knows how much trying to make all these technologies talk to each other. And don't forget, you have to hire the in-house person who may not be necessarily marketer by trade, but you have to get them to understand marketing and then make all these things talk. Or you have to go with a more enterprise-grade, all-encompassing solution where you could access all this information in one place. And just to touch a little more on the concept of pulling in and being able to evaluate new lead sources, that's one of the most common challenges that we see when dealing with enterprise brands and their reluctance to evaluate new lead sources. And for you marketers out there that are, have anybody that's been trying to sell into Fortune 1000s and big logos and big brands, know if you're a lead seller, you know how difficult it is to get in the door unless, you're somebody's cousin, right? And a big part of the reason for that is not that these logos don't want to try out a new lead source. It's that they know that it's going to take them 60, 90 days because of how slow they are in reporting and because of the amount of time that it takes to onboard a new lead source. And they have to go set, 3 meetings with 4 different departments to pull information, be able to make a business decision. By the time that's happened, it's $100,000 in leads, if not more. Right. So to be able to have a tech stack where you could then, from a business development perspective, go to the conferences and without fear, be able to plug in new fear of extreme loss, be able to plug in new lead sources, evaluate in real time whether things are going how they should be going, be able to see day over day, week over week, performance indicators based on whatever you've tailored it to show you for your business is crucial. And especially if you're coming from the affiliate world, anybody in the affiliate world that's been in it for more than 2 years and made it past their freshman class time knows how insanely competitive it is. And you're out there doing the same thing as the company next door and the ones next door to them. So anything you can do, especially as a network, to give yourself a competitive edge is crucial.
It begs the question, right? Because we're talking about, losing thousands of dollars to potentially make thousands of dollars with the investment into a new lead source. How does AI come into the mix for Phonexa? Or is there maybe ways you recommend to clients in terms of using AI to save time and increase efficiencies?
Yeah. So, we have mechanisms within our platform that assist with predictive modeling, being able to make decisions as to which buyers things should go to or not. AI certainly has its place in marketing. We're seeing more and more of it, especially with ChatGPT being in the headlines every single day at some level or another. But, my perspective on it is, it's the shiny new Ferrari, right? It's the hot new thing everybody's jumping on. And if everything else in your house is in order and the fundamentals are in order, absolutely go ahead and add something on that's going to make a significant difference. But before venturing into the unknown, right, let's deal with some of the basics, right? Are you appropriately tracking your calls? Are lead sources really being are conversions appropriately being attributed to the right lead sources, the right sub IDs, et cetera? And are your remarketing efforts with things like A/B testing stuck in 2014, where it's just basic subject line and creative A/B testing? And to the point about call tracking, there's a lot of organizations out there that have looked at call tracking as something that they don't want to get into. They want to dissuade calls from coming in, right? And we want to go more digital. We want to remove the number from our site. We want to have a completely digital experience. And that's all fine and good, but there's the element of being able to allow a consumer to interact in the way that they want to, right? You're going to have the proverbial, who I like to call, Mr. Midnight, who's making their decisions at 1 a.m. about what insurance policy they're going to buy. They don't want to talk to anybody, but there's those that do. And, we find call center operations that are just completely disconnected from the balance of the demand generation funnel. And they just become, catcher's mitts, sometimes largely offshore, that are treating all leads the same. And it's just not a great customer experience.
It's across the board. I think in all digital marketing is ensuring that you're not putting all your eggs in one basket. It could be the blog posting basket, or it could be the video content basket, because you're right. A blog reader is not the same person as a video watcher. And it's parallel across the board, right? No matter where you're looking at it, whether it's people wanting to choose to hit that number to click the call, or whether it's somebody that wants to do a chat bot. Whatever it is, it really varies, right? But Jeff, this has been great. If our audience has any questions about Phonexa and the service that you offer or yourself, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Absolutely. You could visit our site at phonexa.com. That's PHONEXA.com, or email sales@phonexa.com. We have a little north of 200 employees globally, offices in Eastern Europe, the US, where our corporate headquarters is right here in Glendale, California, 2 offices in the UK, and just recently announced a couple weeks ago, we're opening new offices in Canada as well. So we'll be in your backyard soon, Jason.
Nice. Whereabouts?
I'll talk to you about it offline.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Jeff, we end every episode with the same question. That question is this: if you can choose one person, dead or alive, to represent Phonexa, who'd it be and why?
Sun Tzu.
All right. Why Sun Tzu?
The great warrior philosopher.
Nice.
One of my favorite quotes from him is, opportunities multiply as they are seized.
Ooh, I like it. I like it. You're the first person in 189 episodes to say Sun Tzu. There it is. Awesome. Jeff, thank you so much for your time.
Jason, thank you.